I'm too much of a fighter. I'm a lover also, but I'm too much of a fighter to let somebody make me a miserable person because what they did to me. So I guess that's also another big thing for me is not letting him win still.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Or if this is your first time joining in, thank you for being with us. This podcast is a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. I believe that sharing our stories is the first step to healing, and my hope is that the SAS podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Pod Vlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week to provide a platform for victims and survivors to tell their story and for experts and professionals to offer insights and information to help us all on our healing path and to provide an education on being trauma-informed in order to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape or sexual assault. If you are a victim, survivor, or know someone who is, or if you investigate or prosecute rape or sexual assault cases, or if you provide treatment, counseling, or interact with victims or survivors of rape or sexual assault in any capacity, I urge you to listen to this podcast. Remember, you are not alone, and we are all here to support you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening in on Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is episode 43, and this week's guest holds a very dear and precious place in my heart because this week's guest is my own daughter, Cashaye Barrera. I asked Cashaye to come on the show with me because I know how difficult Cashaye's sexual assault was for her as a teenager and how the experiences are still formidable and daunting almost 20 years later as she pushes forward on her healing journey. This is a story that I knew Cashaye has been wanting to tell, and it's a story that I know you all need to hear. You'll understand why as you listen, that this is, again, a story for everyone. Here's Cashaye. Hey, SAS listeners, I'm really excited today. Here in the studio with me is my own daughter, Cashaye Barrera, and Cashaye has agreed graciously and kindly to tell us about her sexual assault story. But before she does that, Cashaye, I'm going to ask you to tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Cashaye Barrera. I'll be 33 in August on the 9th. I'm married to my husband, Markel. We have 4 kids. My oldest, Anna, she's 11. Audrey, she's 8. And then I have Eli, my middle. He's 7. And then I have my youngest, Enya. She's another girl, and she just turned 2. And I'm the stay-at-home mom. I take care of my kids and just living life, I guess, being a mom. So busy mom all the time.
That's for sure. And Enya just had a birthday, just turned 2. We had a great little birthday party over at your house. That was fun. It was good. Well, the reason I asked Cashaye to be my guest today is because Cashaye has her own sexual assault survival story. Cashaye is an adopted daughter. We adopted her 15 years ago. Time flies when you're having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Prior to that, Cashaye was in the foster care system. Cashaye, what are you able to tell us about your sexual assault experience?
Well, I was taken from my birth parents at around 8 years old, as I can remember, 8.5, and put into the foster care system. And I went through a few foster homes before I was put into the home that I was abused in. The furthest I can remember back probably would be age 14. I also remember because I was put on medication at that time, and it was a scary situation. So the furthest back I can remember was 14 years when it started. And at first it was just, kind of weird things at first. Like he wanted to give me rides to school every day and started talking to me more, and which he wasn't like that before. He was kind of a lazy guy. He didn't really do anything. So it was just very weird. And I just thought he was just being nice at first. And then after that, it was started with the abuse. And, at first it was just kind of touching my shoulder, making inappropriate comments. after that, it turned into him touching me. And I can remember only it really being at night. He would only come in at night when everyone was sleeping. And after I had taken my medication, which was a strong dose of Ambien that they had put me on. And so I believe he did it for that reason, because he had that advantage also that I was not fully awake and that I was on medication. So I wasn't there fully. I just remember him coming in and hearing the door every night and knowing that he was going to come lay next to me and that he was going to do the things he was going to do. And I just remember him touching me and breathing on my neck and kissing me and on my body, and just horrible things that a father shouldn't do to their kid. I also remember the few times I did try to tell my foster mom that he was coming in my room at night. She said I was crazy and that, I just wanted attention and that I was a troubled kid and that I just needed to go back to bed. And so even when I tried to ask for help, there wasn't help. And I felt like I was by myself. I had my siblings, but they were so young. There's no way they would understand what was going on. That's all I remember, is it mostly happening in my room every night. And it was almost every night that he would come in and wait for everyone to be asleep, wait for me to take my medication. And he would come in and do the things he did to me. I remember also telling myself that, because I also used to always watch crime shows, because I was just one of my favorite things I was really into. And I remember telling myself that I'm not dumb, I'm smart. I know these things and that he needs to be caught and that this is going to stop one day, that this isn't going to go on forever, that I'm a strong person, that I'm going to put a stop to it. And so I started telling him things like, I don't want you to do that to me, or I'm going to tell somebody. And he would tell me that if I told somebody, that he would put me into, at the time he was working in a troubled teen, I'm not sure what it's called, but he sends them away to like places to get help. And I believed him. I was younger. I wasn't as smart as I am now. So I believed that was going to happen to me, that I was going to get sent away and that I would never see my brother and sister again. So that was scary. And I felt that that's why it took me longer to not tell someone, to not be able to reach out. But I just know that I said that I would never let it get to a point where it destroyed me. And I guess I knew that it was that time that I had to put a stop to it. And there was just one night that I don't know why I was stronger that night, or why I don't know still to this day why I was so strong that night to be able to, and brave enough to be able to call 911 and to tell them like I need help. That's the only person I knew to call, because I didn't know anyone else. I was in the foster care system and I had a lot of emotional problems, and any kid does that comes from a bad home, but I just didn't have anywhere else. And the only thing I could think of was 911. They help. So
Yeah.
That's all I really remember, is just, the abuse, and then it stopping, because there was just one time that I just was strong enough to be able to say something. I just wanted it to stop.
Cashaye, as my daughter, I've told you this before, but I want to tell you now, as you're talking about this, how terribly sorry I am for the experiences that you had in that foster home with him doing what he did to you. You know how terrible I think that is, and my past experience in law enforcement, and how strongly I felt that something should happen to him as a result of his criminal activity. And we'll get to that in a minute. Cashaye, are you able to tell us what the result was of you calling 911 that night?
At first, I couldn't even dial. At first, it was 9-1, and then and 9-1 ed. And so it took me a few times to be able to do it. But once I called, I didn't even really know what to say. I called and I said, hey, my name's Cashaye, and I'm being sexually abused. I'm in a foster home and I need help. And I also told them that, I guess to kind of backtrack, one of the nights that he had sexually abused me, he had gone into the bathroom afterwards and I don't know, did whatever he did and came back into my room and laid back next to me again. And so that night that abuse had happened, he had gotten, I know, because when I had stood up, went to kind of like pull my short up a little bit and I felt something wet on the back of it. And I was like, what is that? And I just knew that it was from him. And so I took my shorts off and I put them in a bag and tied them. And they were actually in my closet for a couple of days before the night came where I had called the cops. When I was on the phone with them, I had also brought up, I said, I also have a bag that has shorts in it that I know has his DNA on it or has something on it that is from the abuse. The officer asked me, is there any way you can leave your home? And I said yes. And I didn't tell them how, because I couldn't just leave through the front door because I would get in trouble. But I was just going to go through my window because I didn't care at that point. I just wanted to get out. So I just told him yes. And I grabbed the bag and I walked to them. They told me they would meet me at Pineview Middle School. And at the time I had lived right behind Pineview Middle School. So I just had to walk up out of my circle and up the street, and it was right there. And so they met me at Pineview Middle. And I remember walking up the street and just seeing them waiting for me. And I don't know, that was like the best, probably the best thing to see, just because I knew I finally had help. So I just ran to their car and I gave them the bag and I told them what it was, and they told me to get in the car and they took me to the emergency room. And I remember going in there and they told me they were going to do an exam on me, and I was really scared because I was by myself and I didn't know what that meant. So it was just very scary. And so they did an exam on me and they got fluids off me and did what they could. And the next thing I remember was them telling me that there was a detective who wanted to talk to me. I just remember going into a room and I remember seeing a recorder sitting in the middle table because I remember seeing that on my shows that I watched. So I sat down and I just waited for her to come in, and she came in and introduced herself. And she just told me that she was going to ask me a few things of what had happened and that I was going to be recorded. And so she asked me questions about the abuse, and it was frustrating because she kind of would tell me like, well, go back and say, well, I thought you said this and I thought you said that. And that became a big thing later on in my case of why he got away with what he did, is because some things I guess I said changed, or I left out little tiny bits that I didn't before. And so that was frustrating because any kid who goes through something like that, and they come back and ask you over and over again. And it was not just that time I was interviewed. There was other times I was interviewed, and they just said through the interviews they had talked to me and interviewed me that there was a few times that my story had changed, or that there was something different I had said about a detail, or just it was frustrating. So and then I don't really remember much after that. I remember leaving there, but I don't remember much after that.
Cashaye, you've just hit the nail on the head with why I do what I do, is because of that very thing, that law enforcement is so out of touch with the realities of trauma and being trauma informed and understanding the neuroscience of trauma on the brain and how it impacts people, especially young children who are scared. And I mean, adults are scared too. I'm not diminishing or taking away from that, but some of the situation that you've described is amplified by age and the fact that you had very little support. And a detective is asking you questions and circling back and saying things like, well, you said this before and you said that before, which is basically them calling into question your truthfulness and your credibility and your memory. And, well, if you changed your story, then that means that the story is inconsistent and we can't do anything with inconsistent stories, when in reality, that's exactly what they should be expecting and anticipating and knowing that that's going to occur, because that's what trauma does to the brain. It makes the trauma itself very difficult to recall in absolute minute detail without leaving certain peripheral parts out, or parts of it that don't seem that important at the moment, but then when you start getting questioned, kind of emphasize certain things, it really changes the scope of how these investigations should really go if they're trauma informed. For that, I'm sorry for what happened to you too. We've talked about this a little bit before, but how this all washed out is not the best way it could have washed out. And as I understand it, in talking to you through these past years of being my daughter, nothing ever happened to this guy.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. I remember that day also very clearly. The day that, we went to court and we were going to find out. What I was thinking is I was going to finally see him go to jail and, pay for what he did. But it came to be him not guilty. And it's just so frustrating, because I tried so hard. And not just that, like, I see stories just like today, it's still happening, where kids are being ignored, and or CPS doesn't check on them, or they say that they do and they're supposed to be doing home visits and they're not, or there is kids that do ask them for help and they ignore it. And I remember that because CPS also came to that home a few times, and I had told them I wasn't okay there. And I didn't tell her I was going through abuse. I just told her I was not okay there and I wanted to leave. And so the frustration I have towards, I guess I shouldn't still have, but I do, because he gets to live his life just fine, and he gets to be out there, and who knows, maybe hurt other people. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not what was supposed to happen. So
For sure. I wonder, Cashaye, if you're able to tell us about the impact that had on your life while it was happening. If I remember right, that it happened over quite a long period of time. You said it started when you were about 14.
yes,
Do you remember when it stopped?
when they took me out of when I called that night, it went on all the time until I was able to call and ask for help. And I believe I was 15, almost 16, or I could have been 16 at the time. It was around 15 or 16 when I had made that call. So I dealt with it for quite a while before I was able to tell somebody.
About 2 years then.
Yeah,
And Cashaye, when they did take you out of the home, did they take your siblings with you at the same time?
they did not. I was very sad about that because there's so much other stuff that happened that involved my siblings. There was also evidence found, video found. They couldn't tell if it was, which doesn't make sense to me, but they couldn't tell if it was my foster dad who was abusing me or if it was my younger brother who was at the time, oh my gosh, barely 5, 6, very young. My brother, I still talk to him, and he's admitted to me, back then did not, but has admitted to me that he did go through a lot. And he also went through abuse. So I know it wasn't just me. I'm sad they didn't take him out because I feel like if they did, maybe they wouldn't have gone through what they went through. I asked them if they were going to take them out and why they wouldn't. And they just told me that that's something they can't do, that they have to first talk to so-and-so and see what's going on. And I ended up finding out that they left them in the home.
And how did this impact your life in other ways?
It made me an angry person, I guess. It has made my marriage very hard. It's made pretty much, well, I was in 2 other relationships before my husband, but any relationship that I was in, it made it very hard for me. There's a lot of things that he did that most normal people would be okay with in a relationship. It just affects my marriage a lot. It affects my relationships a lot. I have a hard time trusting older men. When I'm in public, I'm very cautious of older men around my kids, just because what I've been through. It's frustrating because I want to be able to feel like people are good people, but I guess it's just made me more cautious, made me more aware. I guess those are good things in a way, but it's also made me angry. It's affected my life I'm a religious person, so it's affected my life with God, my relationship with God. There's so many things that it's affected because of his selfishness. That I just wish that those things could be normal for me, but they're not.
Yeah.
And just like going out in public is hard sometimes because I have so much anger still. And, I went to therapy for a while, but that was only till I think I was about 18. I think that was the last time I remember going to therapy. And so it's just hard for me to be in public because I just don't like being around people, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess I found ways to try to deal with it in a good way, to try to let it go. But I know it will always bother me because he's out there. And because I know he's out there, I'll never be okay. And that's what's frustrating for me because he shouldn't be able to do what he's doing. And so I guess it's just affected me in that way, just all aspects in a way, it's made it harder for me.
Yeah. Did it impact your school life?
Yes, very much. That was also a big excuse when I would bring up the abuse, was that I was a troubled kid because I started failing all my classes when the abuse started. And so I wasn't doing good in school anymore. And I was getting called by the office for, flunking school or whatever you called it back then. Truancy, or that's what they called it when I was going to school. I got a lot of truancies in school. I had to do community service a little bit because there was things I did at school that I wasn't supposed to. And that was my agreement with them to be able to keep going to school. I stopped talking to a lot of my friends. I stopped hanging around everybody. So yeah, it affected a lot. I even had friends years later asked what happened to me. And I just told them I went through something really hard and that, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what else to say. So yeah, it affected my school a lot. It was hard for me to get back on track and to be able to graduate and get my GED because it was just so hard to go back and to do that years later, to learn all that again. And after so many years of not being in school, so that was hard.
Yeah.
Just knowing that he gets to live his life like it's nothing, like he gets to do everything, even though he destroyed someone else's life. It's not fair.
Right.
So.
And the way law enforcement and the criminal justice system handled it, basically, the result, him being scot-free, is just maddening and frustrating and really prolongs the trauma.
Yes.
What do you do, Cashaye? You said that you've developed some ways of some coping mechanisms and you're doing what you can to heal. Are you able to tell us some about that?
I think a lot of it is my kids, me knowing that I have something in this life that I have to be here for, that I can't just give up, that I can't be an angry person all the time, because my kids see that. My kids are very smart. So I think my kids have a lot to do with me being able to heal and get through things. Also, like I said, I'm not a super religious person, but I try my hardest. I do believe in God, and I think that's a lot of where I've been able to heal, is knowing that I have him and that I do have someone I can talk to, and that someone that there is listening, and he's doing what he can to help me. It might not be what I exactly want, but he's helping me in a way. I love music, so music has helped me a lot get through so many times where I thought that I didn't want to be here anymore, or I had horrible negative thoughts. Music has been always something to help me get through those times and help me feel better. I care about the people I care about. So I see someone getting hurt, or I see somebody I care about, someone hurt, I will be mean, and I will say something. So I have a lot of anger I'm working on because I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be so angry. And recently, working out has helped me a ton because I can't explain it unless you do it, because it's just something your body feels after you're done working out. It's just the feeling I get, my heart beating that fast. Just me knowing I'm doing something to help my life be better, to help me be healthier, to help me to be here longer for my kids. Yeah. It's just a feeling that, and I'll put my music loud sometimes. Sometimes I don't have good days, and I'll put my music loud. And once I start working out and once I start doing all that, those feelings start to fade, and they don't always go away, but it helps a lot. It helps me get through the day, helps me get through the week. Writing, I write a lot. Not like poems or anything. I used to when I was younger, but I write just how I'm feeling. Sometimes I'll kind of write like I'm talking to someone in a way. So writing has helped me a lot. I do that a lot when I'm feeling down too.
Yeah.
So those are a lot of the things that have helped me get through it, I guess.
And I know you have a really good support system in your adoptive mom.
Yes, and she's amazing. And that's also another thing that has been hard for me too, is, like I said, relationships with anyone. I'm a hard person to be around sometimes. And, I'm working on my relationships with everyone. I'm trying to talk to people more, family and friends, even strangers. I'm just trying to be more out there because I have kind of cut myself off from everybody just because I get down a lot and I feel like I'm by myself when I know I'm not. I do. I have amazing parents and I appreciate them so much. I appreciate you guys so much.
Well, you were a blessing.
But I appreciate you guys doing what you do. just for others too, what
Yeah.
you do to help other people.
Well, it's been a blessing for us to have you in our lives. And I'm so glad that you were placed in our home first as a foster child, and then we ended up adopting you, I think, at 18.
Yep.
And like you said, it's been a rocky road. Not all of it has been smooth and easy and great, but you know that we're there for you. And I know
Yeah.
that you've got other support systems also. And like you said, your children are amazing and are a great support. They are very loving and wonderful children. It's amazing to see your relationship with them grow.
Yeah.
And I know Miguel does a lot. He works hard and he tries his best to be a support system for you also. So I think
Yeah.
that's worth mentioning.
Yes, definitely.
Cashaye, before we go, I want to know what kinds of things you will do now that we've had this discussion. And it's obviously brought up a lot of emotion, a lot of feelings that I know that we haven't talked about or you haven't addressed in a while. What will you do for the rest of today to take care of yourself and to help get past some of the memories and traumas that have come up just in discussing your experience with us?
Um, I guess what I call my me time for me to get better or to feel better, or even sometimes when I just want me time, is just, like I said, music, a relaxing shower without kids bothering me. But usually I'll write, I'll listen to music. Like I said, my kids definitely always get me through the day, especially my youngest, because she's just so funny and she has the funniest personality, and it's just hard to be sad when she's around. So they definitely help a lot. Just getting sun too. I feel like I need to get out today a little bit, probably when it cools down a little bit in the evening, but just get out in the sun and get outside because I am at my house a lot inside. So,
You can always come over here.
yes, go swimming. Maybe we'll come over and do some evening swimming today when it's not so hot outside. So, I definitely will take care of myself. I know I have to for my kids, and something I've always told myself, because there was no justice for me, that I can't let him make me a miserable person, because that's just fuel to him. And I have to live the best life I can, because there's just nothing else I can do. That's the only choice. That's the best choice. I'm too much of a fighter. I'm a lover also, but I'm too much of a fighter to let somebody make me a miserable person because what they did to me. So I guess that's also another big thing for me, is not letting him win still.
Yeah.
So
Do you have a message, Cashaye, for others, teenagers, adults, anyone who find themselves in a similar situation that you're in or that you experienced?
to always tell somebody, everyone goes through something different, but to always tell somebody, never wait. I know it's scary, especially when you don't have a lot of people, but just tell anyone, even a stranger, and to just always stay strong, because that's just what they want. That's what any, what do you call it, abuser or person who's just not a good person wants to do to somebody, is make them miserable. So just always stay strong. Don't let them knock you down no matter what. That's what they want. So to just stay strong, to always tell your story, to be proud that you told your story.
Tell me how it does feel to have told your story.
It feels good. It feels like a weight's been lifted in a way. Like you said, I haven't talked about it in quite a while, but to know that I'm talking to people that have gone through something like I have, or even worse, and maybe they're too scared, or maybe they haven't said anything, to know that I am able to speak. I just hope that they hear me and they know that I care and I know what it feels like. And I know how bad it can make somebody feel like there's no hope, like there's just no reason to be here, but there is. Like, life's amazing, and it's just the horrible people that make it bad.
Yeah.
So, I just hope they hear me and that know that to be strong and to always tell your story.
I think you're amazing. And I
Thank you.
think that what you've done here today for the SAS audience is really powerful and very helpful. And I can't thank you enough for being willing to tell your story and to share it in a true and honest and raw way. I know it was hard, but I also know that you had wanted to do this or you wouldn't have done it. And I know it's
Yes.
going to help other listeners that hear your story, like you said, to be strong and maybe to reach out to someone and get the help they need, because their situation may be different. Maybe they'll be able to
Yes.
talk to someone who's trauma informed and knows the reality of this type of assault and can handle it in such a way that a perpetrator does meet their own justice.
Yes.
I'm encouraging you to keep seeking your justice too, and reaching out to your mom and me and allowing us to help you in that continuing journey of healing, because we're
Yes.
here for you.
Definitely.
Yeah. Maybe we could check in again with you in the not too distant future and see how you're doing and tell us how your healing journey is going.
Yes, that would be wonderful. I would love to do that.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Cashaye.
Bye.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I'm going to take a proud father moment to not only thank Cashaye for sharing her story, but also to tell her how much I love her and appreciate her courage, strength, and fortitude in coming on this show. Cashaye, you did an amazing job, and there aren't enough words to tell you how much I admire your courage. And also, a big thank you to my grandchildren and son-in-law Miguel for their strength in allowing Cashaye the time and freedom to be on this show. I think you'll all agree with me that Cashaye's story is one we can all learn and grow from. So again, thank you, Cashaye. I also want to ask you, my listeners, to write an encouraging comment to Cashaye in the review portion of this episode, and to rate and subscribe to this podcast, even if you don't listen to every episode. Your rating and subscription help this podcast grow, and I know Cashaye would love to get your words of appreciation and encouragement. If you are a victim or survivor of rape or sexual assault and feel you're ready to tell your story on this podcast in order to help others and further your own healing journey, please email me at davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com, and we'll talk about the possibility of you being on this show. Thank you for tuning in to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. Just your presence here is helping bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. And don't forget that another great way to do this is to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.